Hello and welcome to On Camera, an interview series where we chat to some of our resident experts here at Onfido. Today we're chatting to Clare Joy, our Senior Strategy and Expansion Manager. Hi Claire, how are you today?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on camera.
No problem. So could you start off by telling me a little bit about what it is you do at Onfido and what your role involves?
Sure. So I work in the strategy and expansion team at Onfido. We look at the future of the business. So how do we take ourselves from where we are today to where we want to be in the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years?
And so, as part of that, could you elaborate a bit more on what market expansion actually is? For example, are there different ways that companies can expand?
Absolutely. So specifically as a software company, we have lots of avenues for expansion. The most typical one that people think about and talk about when they hear the word expansion is geographical expansion, so opening up offices and teams in new countries. But we can also expand by verticals, so types of businesses that we sell to. We can also expand by customer type, so size of organization, structure of organization that we sell to and work with. And there's kind of two different ways that you can approach an expansion, whichever one of those avenues you go down. One could be an organic expansion, which is really driven by customer demand. So you might see one market that's really reaching out to you a lot via a website and emailing you and asking you to come and help them and work there. But it might also be something a little less organic, where you choose to, say, partner with another organization who's already local in market, or you see a specific opportunity that you want to go after, and you make that happen more inorganically.
So, I guess then, if we were thinking about other software companies than ourselves, what's some key research that businesses should consider before they look to expand?
At Onfido, there are three steps that we take when we look at expansion. The first step is market sizing. So, how big is the market that we're going into? So, something like a population size could factor into this, or size of a specific sector. And we can go down more granular, and obviously, you do that based on what's relevant for your business. The second step is product market fit. So, we know that there's a good size of market, but does what we have today actually address the market needs in that country or in that vertical or customer type? So you want to do some analysis by testing the market, looking at what customers or potential customers are using to solve the same problems that your product solves. Is it something that is very similar to your product, or is it something that's very different? And what are the drivers behind that? Could it be that there's a regulatory reason for why they're using something different, or a cultural reason, or just that they've never thought to change, or they haven't been able to have that innovation for lack of local provider. The third thing that we look at that's kind of related to that is competition. So, are our competitors in that market, or are similar businesses already in that market? Usually, that's a really good sign for us. So, it shows that somebody else has already done the hard work of scoping the market. It shows that there's actually, demand that fits the type of product that we provide. If there's zero competition there at all, there's probably a reason why. So you'd want to dig a little more into the product market fit piece from there.
How can they know that it's the right time to look into new markets? When should they take that leap?
Great question. So there's typically a blend of internal and external factors. So internally, you would need to make sure you have a basic level of investment that you're willing to put into a new place or a new market. So that's financial investment, but also in terms of time and resources from the team. So you've got to have a basic amount there. Doesn't have to be kind of the whole focus and a huge funding round just for it, but something just to get you started. And then external factors. So they could include, say, a really great opportunity that's come along, either via a partner or via an existing client or a new client. There could be a change in regulation that suddenly unblocks that product market fit piece that we spoke about before. Or it could just be a general market trend. So the really obvious one at the moment is COVID. More and more businesses and transactions moving online. That means that certain businesses, certain verticals, and certain countries have to start bringing their processes for identity verification online. That means that for companies like Onfido, that's a huge opportunity, and it's something we can afford to be a bit opportunistic about, and really we should respond quickly to that as an external factor.
So, we already touched on some of the different types of expansion that businesses can look into, but what would you say are some of the main advantages of international expansion?
I think from an international perspective, you really have to think about your audience and your customers. And businesses today are global. So if you want to be a part of that and you want to serve a global customer base, then you have to be global too. Um, you also need to think about it in terms of diversification. So you don't want all of your eggs in one basket. If you're only in your home market and something happens that disrupts that market, and that's where you're dependent on all of your revenue for, you definitely want to make sure you've got some other areas that you've taken time to do business into, just to mitigate against any risks there.
That makes sense. But then I suppose on the flip side of that, are there any disadvantages to international expansion?
I think there can be if you don't do it well. So, one thing that is a risk is losing focus. So, every new market will have quirks and nuances, and you will need to adapt either your product or how you sell it, or both, when you're going into a new market. So, you need to make sure that doesn't distract from the core business that you've built so far. It will take you some time to generate revenues in a new market. So you don't want to be in a position where you've suddenly focused all of your team on the expansion market and then you've forgotten about your customers back home. So that's why you've got to have a dedicated amount of resource, both on the financial and kind of on the uh, team side as well before you go into a new market, so you can know that you can afford to do it. um, Another thing that can be maybe not a disadvantage but a risk is not being an insider. And you're never going to be an insider when you first get there before you even hire a team there. But you can easily waste time or money by focusing on the wrong things, not knowing the market well enough. So that's why it's really important to do your desk-based research before you get there. Have a basic understanding of, the market size and where the opportunity is. Have a basic understanding of the product market fit. Otherwise, you can spend a lot of time learning on the ground, and could be a waste of your time and resource.
Yeah, so that really comes back to what we touched on earlier, that obviously the advantages of international expansion can be great, but you've got to, know that the time is right and know what you're getting yourself into beforehand. And that brings us nicely onto our next question, in that obviously all these different markets are going to have different regulations, which can be quite difficult for businesses to navigate, especially if they haven't done that research beforehand. So, what advice would you give to companies who are trying to manage those different regulatory requirements?
Sure. So, as I said before, do your research. So, do what you can from home, and you can't do everything from home at all, but make a start. And then you can hire locals who can help you out. So, if you're ready to hire a team, that's great. If you're not, you can hire so for example, some lawyers or consultancies who know the market well, and they can help you and point you in the right direction, especially when it comes to regulation, which can be really complex. And it can be quite hard to find people who really understand the local laws and regulations. And then thirdly, I think this is kind of applies to everything in business, but speak to as many people as possible. Events used to be a great way of doing this. Obviously, it's harder at the moment, but you can still do it from your laptop. You can reach out to people on LinkedIn if you have a genuine reason for reaching out, and if you can educate them, for example, in return, people are receptive, and responsive generally. I found, like, I've been pleasantly surprised by that. But use connections you have elsewhere through customers, through contacts, clients, etc. Every conversation will give you something useful. It might not answer the specific question you went in with. So, for example, you might be looking to find out about one specific regulation, and the person you speak to might not know about that. But what they will give you is, say, the name of somebody else to go to speak to, or they might even just give you some hints in the way that they speak, the way they talk about things, so that you understand how business is done in that country, the relevant cultural nuances, how people structure things. That can also be really helpful and can help you kind of gain insider status faster. There's a few other things that you can do, like testing hypotheses with local customers. So you can go in and say, from my desk analysis, it looks like this is what the market needs. Can you confirm, or do you think it's something different? And you can access those customers or potential people in the market through all sorts of forums, through, I don't know, there's this tech associations, fintech associations, meetups, all of that kind of stuff available to you. So you can just go in and start having conversations, start testing things with locals.
And I suppose then to bring it back to what we do at Onfido, on Vido, we verify users' identities online using AI technology. And we've already started expanding internationally as a company, but from your perspective, do you see what we do, identity verification, kind of increasing globally?
Absolutely. As I said before, customers today are global, and that's only increasing. And already people were doing more and more online, especially younger generations. But that's obviously really scaled up recently with coronavirus. So I think there's no question about whether or not it's going to increase. It's just, at what rate and who's going to be a part of the conversation in the next few years to come.
Thank you very much for joining me today, Claire. There were some really great insights there. To round off, if you could just in one sentence summarize what would be your advice to companies who are looking to expand internationally?
Sure. So, in a sentence, I would say that you need to balance. You need to balance your at home research at your desk, looking at all of those things that I discussed earlier. But you also need to balance that with your in market research. So, talking to local people, local customers, local partners.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Charlotte.
And thank you to everyone who was watching as well. Hope you enjoyed it.